All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the August 6th, 2026 meeting of the Sacramento Children's Fund Planning and Oversight Commission. The time is now 10:08. The meeting is now called to order. Will the clerk please call the roll to establish a quorum?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning. Today's meeting is being streamed live on YouTube in English and Spanish. Please note that the live captioning and translations are AI generated and may contain errors. Members, if you now can unmute your microphones for roll call. Commissioner Volsi?
Here.
Commissioner Williams? Here. Commissioner Thomas is absent. Vice Chair Ghaffari?
Present.
Commissioner Kravitz-Wertz?
Here.
Commissioner Rules-Perez is absent. Commissioner Green?
Here.
And Chair Richardson.
Here.
Thank you. We have quorum.
I would like to remind members of the public and chambers that if you would like to speak on an agenda item, please turn in a speaker slip. Is that still speaker slip?
So it's the digital.
It's a digital, I thought so. So I want to make sure that I did this correctly. I want to make sure I'm reading it correctly. There is a new way to turn in speaker slips. We have a QR code that is listed where you would normally find the speaker slips. And so you will fill that out in order for you to be able to speak. You will have 2 minutes to speak once you are called on. After the first speaker, we will no longer accept speaker slips and or QR codes for submissions. We will now proceed with today's agenda. Would everyone please rise for the opening acknowledgement in honor of Sacramento's indigenous people and tribal lands. To the original people of the land, the Nisenan people, the Southern Madu, Valley, and Plains Miwok, Patwin, Wintun peoples, and the people of the Wilton Rancheria, Sacramento's only federally recognized tribe. May we acknowledge and honor the Native people who came before us and still walk beside us today on these ancestral lands. By choosing to gather today in the active practice of acknowledgement and appreciation for Sacramento's indigenous people history, contribution, and lives. Thank you. Everyone can be seated. And so before we move into our first piece of business, we have filled a chair. We are growing here, and we are really excited to welcome Commissioner Green. Commissioner Green, if you would just introduce yourself, and we'll go through, because I don't know if you know who everyone is yet, but we would just like to welcome you to the commission, and take it away.
Well, nice to meet everyone. My name is Alan Green. My heart really does sit here with this commission and what it's doing for folks that are 24 years and under that are trying to make it, that don't have opportunities, so that we can help navigate them through some of the darkest times of their life. So it's an honor and a privilege, and I look forward to working with everyone. Thank you.
For being here, Commissioner Green. And Commissioner Green is the mayor's seat that's filled. I believe we're still missing one. We're still missing seat 2, but that's okay, we're growing. And so if everyone doesn't mind, if you don't mind just saying who you are and which district you're from, just to introduce yourself to Commissioner Green.
District 3. Looking forward to working with your brother.
I'm Shannon Williams with District 4.
And you already know who I am, Gina Richardson, District 1.
And I'm Lillian Ghaffari, District 6, and happy you're here.
Hi, Nicole Kravitz-Wertz in District 7.
I'm also in District 7. I never thought in a million years I'd live in a District 7, but I do now. Crazy.
All right. Well, look at that. We have some folks who aren't here today, but you will get a chance to meet them soon. We are a strong and mighty commission. I'm really excited about you being here. And so we're going to go ahead and move on to our first piece of business today, and that's approving the consent calendar. Clerk, are there any members of the public who will wish to speak on the consent calendar?
Thank you, Chair. We do not have any speakers for the consent.
All right. Thank you. Are there any commissioners who would wish to speak on the consent calendar? Okay. All right. I don't see anyone needing to speak, so can someone pass a motion, and can we get a second?
I make a motion to pass the consent calendar.
Second.
All right. So there's been a motion and a second. Vice Chair Ghaffari has motioned, and Commissioner Kravitz Words, I'm trying to do it all in the order. Second. Do we do a vote?
Roll in favor.
Okay, we're gonna do all in favor. All right. Is it just all in favor? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. Aye.
I should have said if anybody objects, right?
Any opposed?
Any opposed? Yeah, I should've
Any
did that one
abstain?
first. Any abstain?
Yeah,
Okay. All
the
right.
motion passes.
Next time, it passes.
There you go.
Yeah. I'm in my head this morning. I haven't drank this coffee yet, everybody. Questioning everything, okay? All right, so we will now proceed to the discussion calendar. I believe since everyone's here, we're gonna go ahead in our original order. Initially, we were gonna change the order, but we're not. We're gonna go ahead and move forward. We're gonna discuss item 1, the Sacramento Children's Fund implementation update and third-year review. And there's no presentation for this one.
Correct.
Okay,
I think Julie will just.
okay. Julie, you're speaking on this one?
Oh, my mic's already unmuted. Yeah, so essentially this is a carryover item from the last meeting. We're going to continue our discussion on, it's a pretty open-ended staff report item. So here we're looking to gather feedback from you all about what you would like to see in future funding rounds, specifically the second round of the current 5-year SIP. And we discussed talking more about certain fund goals that we hadn't quite touched on, such as substance abuse and homelessness, to see what your guys' priorities were for this next future funding round in those target areas. But this is also a place where you can talk about general recommendations for the next future funding round. And then we have another separate item for target populations, which will come next, so we can get into those discussions in the following item. But this is more of a general discussion surrounding the fund goals, recommendations or just any discussion and feedback you would like to have surrounding those, specifically as it pertains to sort of the outcomes you would like to see in the next RFP, as opposed to or in alignment with the last round of the RFP and the current council-approved SIP, if that makes sense.
Okay, so with that said, because I know we're gonna talk about, you just said we're talking about the targeted populations afterwards, have lots of notes on that and can't wait to see our presentation as we wrap that with a bow. I would like to just say to the commission, our goal, when Julie says the outcomes, just because I don't, and I'm sure you don't either, want this to continue to be a conversation that continues to run on and on and on. Anything's in the RFP, so the RFP was sent out to us, so I'm not sure if everybody got a chance to take a look at the RFP itself. I don't know if this is something that I can do. Is there a way that we can have the RFP, like just the scoring put up on the screen, just to remind commissioners of what that looks like while we're having this conversation? Or we can wait, but I just wanted to
I
get
could
that up
get
at some
that for
point.
you, but we just need like 10 minutes.
That's fine, that's fine. That's fine. I'll start the conversation off just because, oh, I'm so sorry, Commissioner Williams. I'll go ahead and start the conversation off. In looking at the RFP itself, I was having this conversation with Commissioner Williams before we started, looking at how much weight went on program design versus other elements that we're looking at adding into, which is coming up in targeted populations of us finding Sacramento's most vulnerable youth. So I know that we should be looking at changing that portion as well, the amount of weight. I don't know if we're gonna have, if we're going to be the ones determining how much, or even if we can determine how much weight goes to an item, because currently, I believe the program design was 50 points last time. But we're going to get all that up so everybody can see. But I would like for us to look at the RFP itself, so that way you can see exactly what's there, so we can see what needs to be changed. And I'm hoping that we can leave this meeting with at least 90% of what we would like to see change with the RFP. Okay? And with that said, Commissioner Williams.
Thank you. I was wondering if we could start the conversation about, and I know we talked about this a little bit before, but the outcomes of the granting process. And going back to the SIP and the community input that we had, and maybe thinking about, have we met those goals and those objectives that we originally had in the SIP? And I think before we were talking about the fact that the mental health kind of bucket among the 5 priorities, most of the organizations were granted within that category, and it was a really broad category, meaning that it was a whole range of things, from recreational activities for children to treatment for children. All of those are fantastic, but the goal of the SIP is to reach the children and youth that are most impacted by poverty, violence, and trauma. So I think this conversation, I was just going to frame that in that previous conversation of how we get there, and I think the RFP is the mechanism in which we get there. I'm wondering, with homelessness, we do have the program for foster youth, which is a pretty big investment in that. So I'm curious what other commissioners think about prioritizing homelessness and the substance abuse category.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioner Kravitz-Wertz?
Yeah, so that was a great setup, Commissioner Williams, because I wanted to share something that our team outside of this commission has been working on with a local CBO that brings together young people, most of whom are in high schools in and around the Sacramento region. And we, this happened about two and a half months ago, and we asked them actually very specifically to rank these 5 priorities, just to get the youth perspective. We had almost 100 young people rank these 5 categories, both on just literally on a ladder, and then in terms of like the dollar amount out of $100 they would want to spend. And so I just wanted to provide some of those results, as I think it relates to some of this conversation. So young people, everything was very close. So I'll say that just like to ground the conversation. But young people did rank mental and emotional health as their top priority, but then then it went violence, homelessness, supporting children and youth, and then preventing substance abuse. But so I think we're generally in the right ballpark in terms of how we've been allocating, or how the funds were allocated. Although I will say, given where most of the funds went from the first RFP, with 50% going to that mental health category, given what young people are saying, we may want to put greater weight on these 4 other categories just to make up that difference, kind of thing. And in that respect, I think violence was sort of their second choice. Preventing violence was their second choice up there. Homelessness was also up there, but I think you're right, Commissioner Williams, about we have another mechanism that hasn't been implemented yet to kind of address that. And then after that, the supporting young children and families and substance use. So I just wanted to share some of that from young people's perspectives themselves.
Thank you, Commissioner Kravitz-Wertz. Vice Chair Ghaffari?
Hi. Okay, so in terms of the different populations and the weight on each one, I actually don't have any opinions on that. I'm interested to hear, what other people think and want to support that. And I'm an LMFT, so clearly, I want mental health. But again, that's an umbrella term. So if we're, giving more weight to these other categories, then mental health will be a byproduct. So, so that's what I think about that. When it comes to actually adjusting and editing the RFP, I want to bring back the tertiary, secondary model that I brought up last time. And so what we can do in each of these categories is rewrite something in there saying, is somebody actively experiencing homelessness? Is somebody actively addicted to substances? And that's how we're gonna, I think, weed out. And again, prevention programs are great, but if we're looking at really serving the most vulnerable youth with these funds, we want to, in each category, say who is your program, something like, is your program actively serving youth who are actively experiencing XYZ, whatever the category is. So just in terms of like specifics, that is something that I wanted to suggest.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gavari. I'm just gonna jump on in there since there's no other speakers. I'm on the same page as Vice Chair Gavari because I love the chart from last time, Commissioner Kravitz-Wertz, when you presented, when you talked about, when you took all of the elements that were in the SIP and you put them in this chart, and it was like an aha moment to look at how we're looking at populations, but I wonder if this is something that we can do when it comes to prevention level. So I believe we had said that we were looking more, and I don't remember the exact answer on this, and if we're able to move forward, so we need that first. On the level of prevention, I don't know if we were saying specifically we're looking for the primary level, but more so the secondary and or tertiary level. So if we are able to look for or put more language for secondary and tertiary, are we able to put it in something along these lines? Where it would be like in a chart form and it would say what secondary and tertiary, what those things look like for each of the fund goal areas. Is everybody following me? Is that something we can do?
So I have some follow-up questions. I guess it depends on like what exactly you're trying to do there. So are you wanting the applicants to just identify what type of program they are? Are you wanting to weight their score based on what level they lie in? And if we're looking at doing that, that's going to be a lot harder because I think as we've spoken with city attorney, and because in the strategic investment plan, we give examples, multiple examples of really upstream, or sorry, what was the primary, thank you. Or primary prevention methods that we wanted to uplift. And so if we then write into this next RFP that no, now we want to give preference to tertiary, that's actually going against our council adopted SIP, as far as I understand it. And so I think we have to be careful about weighting in our RFP these levels, but that doesn't mean that we can't incorporate it or collect that information or maybe wrap it into our questions. So that's just one, I'm going to leave it there and see where you guys take it from there.
Follow-up question to that, and then I'm going to get to the speakers. I believe last time we said something about 98% of people receive, was it the preference points? Was it for the last cycle, was it 98% of applicants received the preference points because they didn't have to, there wasn't anything that they had to provide, like a data point or to say, I think they just had to answer like, yes, I do X, Y, Z. Was that correct?
It's correct that over 90% of the applicants did receive the preference points. They did have to fill out an attachment, and in that attachment, they had to list what zip codes and neighborhoods that they served, and those had to be marked and like found within the seed tool areas that you all had adopted. Mm-hmm. And then we did ask for, in addition to that, MOUs or contracts with community centers and for them to list exactly where they provided the services and who. However, the issue sort of became that we didn't define clearly enough how applicants would be eliminated from receiving that. Mm-hmm. preference points, if that makes sense, and then it becomes really hard to eliminate somebody and allow someone else. And so that became a gray area, to be really forthright with what happened. But we did collect evidence, and we did base it on trust that those people were filling out the application in good faith and they were telling the truth. So we didn't award any points to anyone who didn't fill out that attachment.
No, and I understand that, but what I'm saying is, since we already have language in the SIP where we've already listed primary prevention, is what we just discussed. Is there a way preference points can be given to those organizations who have proven secondary and tertiary then, since we can't specifically put, these are the type of organizations and programs that we're looking for? So can we do preference points for that? Because in my mind, but I don't know, in my mind, I'm thinking, if we had last meeting, we said 98%, which is a high percentage, not to say everybody doesn't qualify for that. But if we are sitting here saying outcome-wise, we're looking for programs that are programmatic in secondary and or tertiary, and there are people, majority of people are applying for primary, it feels like preference points could be given for those secondary, tertiary folks, since they are doing that, and that's the outcomes that we're saying that we want to see. And that's not like a general score, but a preference point, so we're not actually requiring it. We're just saying, if you do this, gold star for you, this is what we're looking for. But you get what I'm saying? Or is that?
Can I say something really quick? Yeah, just to kind of sum up, it's what I'm hearing is that, like, the way our SIP is written is that it doesn't matter which one you are, if we're looking at it in that framework, as long as you're doing it well. And so that's what we're giving our funds to, it sounds like. So again, going forward, when we edit the SIP, then we got to think about it differently if we have that goal of reaching the most vulnerable youth, I think. However, so if we're in the guidelines, and and we can't change certain things, yeah, I do support what Chair Richardson is saying about, at the very least, preference points. And we don't even have to use the tertiary language, but we could say, is your program serving youth who are actively experiencing substance use or homelessness or whatever it is, or mental health crises or things like that?
Could you explain the tertiary kind of model for the public, and we have a new commissioner?
Yes.
Because I think that would be helpful, that background.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so this is a public health, I think it comes from public health model. So you can use this in different health categories. What we're talking about is in what I gave the presentation on last meeting was specifically on mental health, and so I used this primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention categories for mental health. So in talking about mental health, we'll say primary prevention involves proactive, universal strategies that stop a mental health disorder or crisis from developing in the first place. So if you're looking at homelessness or substance use, it's that prevention. There's not even anything going on, maybe some risk factors, maybe some disadvantaged backgrounds, these youth are experiencing, but there hasn't even been any anxiety reported, any depression reported, et cetera. So that's primary. So the issue hasn't started. Secondary is early detection, rapid intervention, and limiting the duration of a severity of a mental health condition once it appears. So this is secondary. This is the middle category. And so again, you can use this with homelessness, substance abuse. So, they just started using substances. Let's find those youth, and then let's treat them and put in those protective factors and things like that. And then so tertiary in a mental health lens is steps in after a mental health condition has been diagnosed or an acute crisis really is going on. So this would be people who are walking around having active psychotic episodes, which we see here in Sacramento all the time. This would be someone is, cutting themselves and, in the hospital. So what I had talked about last meeting was that as the SIP is written and as the Sacramento Children's Fund aims to address, it's the most vulnerable youth. So the way I see it is secondary and tertiary prevention is that ultimately I think we want to direct our funds to youth in these categories. So, and I think was that good? Okay, and then, so going back to the RFP and how we can edit it in a way that follows the rules that we're given, because we did already write the SIP. So something like preference points for tertiary and secondary prevention I think is a good idea, or in some other way, that would be great, so.
Thank you, Vice Chair Ghaffari. Commissioner Crappersworth?
Yeah, so I think I have a couple of thoughts. One is I like the idea of at least trying to delineate where applicants' proposed strategies lie along the spectrum of prevention. And I think we have an opportunity in this kind of in-between time before we start editing the SIP and when we're actively doing evaluation for this first round of funded programs to ask about their services and actually see from the data whether what is sort of being said here actually it plays out in what's actually happening. So we could have our evaluation partner ask orgs about classifying their programs and see if our hypotheses about what had happened with the SIP are actually played out. I would like to see that before we kind of make any sweeping changes, because in part, I think preferencing secondary and tertiary services overly preferencing secondary and tertiary services means that some of our goals are like sort of off the table, like the supporting young children and families, which is all about preventing problems before and supporting families so that they don't experience kind of some of these later problems down the road. And so, I think I want us to be careful for things like that. Also, yes, we're wanting to support mental health, but also emotional wellness, which again to me is much more of an upstream primary prevention kind of strategy. And in general, from a public health lens, as someone who is in the public health space, what we know from data and research is that when we're preventing problems on a population level from before they're a problem, like that has a much broader impact than only addressing the people who are actively experiencing the most devastating issues. So, I think all of those play into this conversation for me. I also just want to note that I was looking through some of our existing recommended strategies for each of the goals. And I think, for most of them, there are even recommended strategies already in the SIP that fall along all three dimensions of the spectrum of prevention. And so I think we could help in the RFP by delineating some of these same kind of recommended strategies across the continuum. And then that would facilitate, I think, applicants in identifying where they lie along that, being able to speak to that, and then us on the back end in terms of research and evaluation, being able to kind of really see where our services are going along that spectrum.
I like that. Before I call on the next commissioner, so just to go back to what you just said about the strategies that are recommended in the SIP, so are you saying all of the prevention levels are already listed? You're saying go through and take away?
No, I'm not I do, so I see, so like, for example, in even just Fund Goal 1, the mental health strategy, things like cognitive behavioral interventions can be more of a secondary preventative approach. Referrals to kind of services for the substance use strategy, or in the violence prevention strategy, we have a whole sort of set of strategies on the community violence intervention side, which can be both secondary or tertiary. Yeah. So I think we already have some examples across the spectrum. I wouldn't take away any, I would just group them accordingly so it's just clearer for applicants, for us as a commission, and for the evaluation partner.
I like that, and thank you for bringing light to that as well. All right. All right, Commissioner Williams.
I was going to say, not Nicole. Commissioner Kravitz-Wertz. I was sort of thinking along those same lines, and I actually went back to the Measure L goals, which are prevent and reduce. So I think we can't completely strip that out. But the question I was going to ask is, I wonder when we have this conversation about different target populations, in essence, we're looking at populations who are at risk for a lot of these things by, where they live, their precariousness to homelessness. And so maybe when we think of the tertiary kind of framework, a lot of them are in the two, where they're maybe not actively, for example, involved in violence, but they are exposed to violence in the course of their day-to-day. So maybe we're getting at that already with this population. I don't know. But I think it is hard if we do another layer of preference points, it might get a little complex for reviewing them.
Yeah. I agree, and I'm saving my comments for the end, but thank you. Commissioner Green?
Thank you. So one thing I was just kicking around is, with all these CBOs that are applying for these grants, maybe having them share their success rate, maybe a 30, 60, 90-day success rate with the folks that they work with. If that was something, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here, but, diving a little deeper into these CBOs, or even maybe doing a job. I was talking to Julie about this in a Zoom meeting, but, maybe actually meeting them, a couple of commissioners, and seeing, what type of program they have and how it's really impacting their community.
Thank you, Commissioner Green. I think, and that's something we've been, I think, the end of last year, even the beginning of this year, we were talking about having commissioner visits so that we can go on site and we can meet some of the CBOs and see the program, or hear them talk about the programs and or see the programs that they were speaking of. It was one more thing that you just said, and we had mentioned that as well. It kind of fell in line of what Commissioner Kravitz-Wertz said. What was your last point? You said, what?
The success rate.
Yes. So it kind of in combination, so it looks like we're all on the same page, but yes, good comments. Thank you. All right. Commissioner Volsi?
Chair, it's great to have you as chair. It's my first meeting with you as chair, so I think what I wanted to ask is probably like along the same line. It's basically, do we have any data from or any real report from the current grant recipients? And are we looking at what works, what didn't work? And based on how we're trying to structure the following SIP, or we're trying to structure it in a way that continues the work to make sure we're growing, make sure we're measuring impact, or we're just trying to kind of like start fresh somewhere, like, we're gonna basically start fresh and figure that out. So, and I haven't, I've missed a couple meetings, so I'm not sure if there's any data to show like what's working, how many people are being served, like where they're being served, and if the metric that we've set at the forefront of the original SIP, if we are actually like meeting set metrics. So I'd like to see that and be able to kind of like take a look at how we're measuring any of it, if possible.
Great question, Commissioner Volsi. So we did, staff did provide a pretty basic progress report of data collected up through, I believe it was Q3 of grant reporting for the current SCF portfolio. And we can resend that out to the commission to review again. We do have our evaluator on board, and so our next annual report will be coming from them. I'm just going to use this opportunity to give you a tiny update on them. So they've been working hard. We are going to be holding our first community of practice later this month in August to meet with the SCF portfolio and really launch the evaluation portion with them, because we've been doing some internal planning work. And then they hope to come to the commission later this year. And then you guys will have the year 2 report with a much broader sort of overview of what the grantees have been doing. But that's going to come in the new year, since our first grant term for SCF grantees ends on 12/31/26. So that's the initial term, which was 1.5 years. So we're going to give the evaluator some time to collect all of that data for the first 6 quarters, build a report, and then that will come to you as outlined in your scope to review those reports as well. So yes, we have a progress report I can send you. The evaluator is working hard. They're going to come to you probably in October or November, depending on what we are all planning to do and our agendas. And then you'll also be receiving a year 2 report in the new year.
Awesome, thank you.
I wanted to also add to that, Commissioner Volsi. So in the previous commission meetings we've been having, and the reason why we're having this conversation around prevention levels is, from what we saw, the prevention levels of the CBOs who were awarded, everything felt like it was primary. It felt like it was in the first level of prevention. Not to say that there's something wrong with that, but we started having the conversation of, since we had all of these folks who were awarded under the primary level of prevention, what would that look like if we opened that up? And the reason why Vice Chair Ghaffari and Commissioner Thomas, they brought us language regarding what other prevention levels look like, to see if that's something, because if we're talking about reaching Sacramento's most vulnerable youth, and we have these different levels of prevention, which we now know, Commissioner Kravis-Word said, are listed in our strategies, what does that look like if we're trying to reach other prevention levels as well? So I think that's where that conversation was coming from. Also, the grant awards, they were received, what, was that July of 2025? So everybody's still brand new in receiving all of the awards that they've received, but good to know that we'll be getting something later, that the evaluator's on board, and we'll be getting something later so we can evaluate. So just wanted to just add some some information to that.
No, thank you for that. It's just as we are building the following SIP, right? It also it makes a lot of sense for us to like think about what the current program was actually like coming out of it. So we're not starting, always like starting from scratch to some extent, and just making sure like whatever is working, we figure out a way to make sure we continue to fund it so it continues to work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner Volsi. All right, Vice Chair Ghaffari.
Yeah, so, and I also just want to agree with what everybody's saying here about how important primary is. I know I'm coming in hot with talking about secondary and tertiary, but just as Chair Richardson just said, it was just that there were a large number of the primary grants given, and, you know, if anything, just bringing some intentionality and mindfulness and awareness about who we are awarding and then what type of program they are. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Kravis-Wertz.
Yeah, so a couple of things that I'll keep short because I think they're mostly just underscoring some things that have already been said. One, I think, I'll just say again, I think we, on our own base kind of assessment, CBOs and the non-city and city public agencies, so not just CBOs that we're talking about here. I actually think a lot, maybe more of the non-CBO orgs were more on the primary side of things. But in any case, all of this is our kind of anecdotal assessment, and so that's where I just want to reiterate that, like, we're saying things, but let's make sure that at some point we are able to like base that in the evaluation report of things. And then so related to that, which is actually why I was back on, and Julie, you sort of addressed this in your comments, but I'm wondering if the evaluation partner or somebody from the evaluation partner organization could come and just talk to us sooner than later, especially because I think some of us are wanting to incorporate some of their ideas into this next RFP kind of thought process. And so even if it's not to bring actual, like necessarily outcome or process data from their assessment, I think it's more just to talk through their process of evaluation would be great.
I'm just going to hop on and tell you, yes, they can come in one of your next 2 meetings. And they're excited to come. And then I also, I forgot to address Commissioner Green's comment, but we are going to be rolling out site visits starting in the new year, and you all will be invited to attend in quorum-friendly numbers.
All right. That's exciting. And so I want to make sure that we're getting the outcomes that we need from this meeting, because I feel like the next conversation, the next item is where we're going to really dive deep and start making some decisions. And so because I don't see any additional speakers, any additional commissioners to speak on this particular item. Do I have to ask for speakers? Okay. Clerk, do we have any speakers from the public on this item?
Thank you, Chair. We do not, actually, I'm so sorry, we do. Mercedes Parker?
All right.
I think she just,
Okay.
Hi, good morning. My name is Mercedes. Most of y'all have seen me before. I work with California Youth Connection. I've born and raised in well, not born, but I was raised in Sacramento. I just want to say on the topic of evaluating CBOs as far as how effective they are in prevention, that we're thinking about prevention as a long-term goal. And I appreciate the comment that you made about measuring that. I think 30 to 90 days is way too short of a window. So I just wanted to throw that into consideration. I missed the first part of the conversation, so I might have more comments later, but I just wanted to throw that in there. Thank you.
thank you for your comments, Chair. That completes our speakers for this item.
Great. And thank you so much for giving us that thought to think of. All right. We're going to go ahead and move over to our next item. We're going to get into item, is it item 2 or am I looking at this wrong? It is item 2? Item 2 are targeted populations. Am I saying this correctly? Okay, just wanted to make sure. I have like 15 different papers over here, it feels like. I wrote notes as well. So we're going to go ahead and move into our target populations presentation. I believe, Commissioner Kravitz-Wertz, you have a presentation, correct?
I do.
All right. Floor is yours.
Thanks, Chair. So level setting here, this will be a short PowerPoint presentation that is intended just to sum up and consolidate some of our discussion from our last commission meeting related to the priority populations lifted up in the strategic investment plan, and then how that is reflected in the RFP. Last time we brought to the commission a couple of recommendations and options within those recommendations. This is really an opportunity to kind of narrow in on what we want to do moving forward. And this is based on the ad hoc subcommittee meetings. So I'll go through 4 different recommendations that are all really tailored to potential changes to the RFP or revisions to the RFP. So currently, the RFP has 4 scoring categories with questions subsumed within each of those 4 categories. Currently, the priority populations idea is reflected under that second bucket of program design. It is not its own scoring category. So our recommendation for consideration by the rest of the commission is to break out the priority populations category as its own and give it its own score separate from the program design. Here we list this as priority populations and equitable reach, and provide some potential just draft language of what that could look like. That's reflected here on the screen, but essentially it just allows applicants to take some real time in writing to delineate who they're serving, how they're ensuring that they're meeting those youth and families who aren't already connected to services in particular. And then also on this table, you'll see sort of we have that proposed slightly revised scoring criteria that would devote 20 of the 50 formerly program design points to now that priority populations category. Recommendation number 2 is something I think we all relatively were on the same page in our last meeting, but essentially that we would group our priority populations into 3 different categories to really help facilitate applicants in ensuring that they are meeting, again, the youth most impacted by poverty, trauma, and violence, and doing that through ensuring that they are tailoring their services to youth that are in at least 2 or 3 of all of these 3 categories. In conversation with City Attorney, we have revised this first category on the left here, calling it something along the lines of historically underserved, but these are, children and families that have historically experienced exclusion or discrimination or systemic barriers to services and opportunities, and whose circumstances aren't otherwise represented in these other 2 categories. This category is intended to encompass social identities like race and ethnicity, LGBTQ status, immigration status, things like that. So that's where those folks might be encompassed under, but not exclusively. That second category is just 3, or these 2 other categories are things we've talked about in the past, but are just from the SIP, directly from the SIP. So then building on that, our third recommendation then is to explicitly in the RFP ask applicants to identify their priority populations that they're serving and ensure that they are serving at least 1 priority population from 2. At first we were thinking maybe 2 of the 3 categories, but it's up for discussion. 2 or 3, we could ask applicants to identify populations across all 3 categories or just 2 of them, but really the idea here is for applicants to demonstrate service to youth experiencing multiple co-occurring adversities and structural barriers. And there's a couple examples here. So an applicant might say that they are serving unhoused youth exposed to violence, as opposed to just saying that they're serving unhoused youth or only youth exposed to violence. So really getting at that co-occurrence idea. And finally, this is my last one. We just, in this slide, provided some potential draft updated language for this new priority populations category and actual question so that it can be scored independently in the RFP. So on the left side of the screen is the language from the previous RFP. It was question 5 under the program and project design section. And as I noted previously, now we're recommending that this be its own section and then have at least this one new delineated question about ensuring that applicants are describing really who they're serving and how they're serving youth who have co-occurring and multiple needs. So none of the language up here obviously is set in stone. It was more just for some examples to get us going. And with that, I think that's all I got. I'll open it up to the rest of the commission.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Kravitz-Words. I like this. I want to say something, and this is just a question because I don't know, and I can just be, ignorant to the fact of understanding. It feels like, so just looking at this with even the language, so when we're talking about socially complex needs, hard to reach, is that considered one and the same? Because I know we're having this conversation of prevention levels with secondary and tertiary symptoms and or situations. Those feel like you probably get what I'm trying to say, but I can't say it. I'm trying to figure out how I'm trying to say it. It feels like when we're asking about socially complex needs and or hard to reach and looking at what those categories are experiencing, it feels like they are in relation to prevention level of secondary and tertiary?
I think you can make an argument for thinking about these populations as either at risk or having opportunity for intervention, at which point I think, you know, that may fall more in the sort of secondary prevention spectrum. But I think as Commissioner Williams gave an example earlier about how children or youth exposed to violence might not actually be involved in violence themselves, but just by the nature of living in a community that experiences elevated levels of violence might be at greater risk for experiencing all host of suboptimal outcomes later on. And so that would still, to me, be kind of more on the primary prevention side. But so, like, I think, you know, this is, it's a little bit of a fluid kind of phenomenon depending on how you're defining things. So I don't think it's a perfect one-to-one alignment between these populations and the spectrum of prevention.
You can see what I'm saying.
But yes, I think there is a way that we can think about some of these as obviously interconnected.
Because that's the reason why I was like, okay, I like this, because I'm like, it feels like it's saying exactly what we're asking for. And I wanted to just kind of point out, if everybody takes a look at recommendation 1 and seeing, because program design changed. So now program design has this is just proposed, and we don't know exactly what the final would look like, but program design having 30 and the priority populations and equitable reach getting 20, just because we are trying to make sure that we're reaching Sacramento's most vulnerable youth. I do have a question regarding this, because regarding preference points now, currently as it stands, priority populations received through the COI isn't, the preference point goes towards priority populations. Is that correct, or am I looking at wrong? No? Okay. Not really? Okay.
Nicole might be able to answer this a little better than I.
Well,
But it's interesting, because I'm curious how we want this to commingle with the SEED COI tool, because it is a way to address the quote-unquote target population outlined in the measure, which we sort of, as you all built as a commission, this tool to try to get to youth most impacted by poverty, trauma, and violence. And that was the tool, and it does have a preference point. This is not exactly the same, but again, there is a crossover. I believe you could definitely make that argument. Nicole, please.
Yeah, so I think, I think totally right. I think these have a lot of overlap, but the way I think about the SEED and the COI tool is more of a place and a geographic level, ecological level kind of way of getting at serving places that have the greatest need. Whereas this priority populations recommendations are really more at an individual and family level. So getting at those individual families that are having the greatest needs or would benefit from additional services. So just as a quick example to differentiate. So someone might live, a family might live in an area that is designated in our SEED tool as being particularly underserved, and so they would, and an applicant that serves that area would get the preference points, but maybe their organization doesn't focus on serving families that are low income. So you can be a higher income family, but live in a neighborhood that maybe doesn't have a whole lot of services directed to it. So this is what we call the ecological fallacy in the research.
Okay. Because I wanted to make sure I understood that and make sure we all understood if these two things were doing the same things, because then it was going to bring back the question of, can a preference point be more of impact then?
I don't think they're doing the same thing, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend getting rid of I think we have a lot of opportunity to refine the preference points related to the SEED and the COI tool, but I don't think they're doing the exact same thing.
I have a question on preference points. I'm sorry, and I'm going to stop. I have a few more questions because I really do want us to talk about this. So let's just say District 1, underserved, doesn't have lots of services. We don't have lots of these particular programmings for our youth, right? Someone in District 1, let's say an organization, CBO, can get preference points if they are in a area specifically that's underserved. Okay, so that's what that means. Okay, just wanted to understand that from my mind. Okay, I have another question, but I'm gonna stop at the moment. Vice Chair Ghaffari?
Thank you for your presentation and coming up with this. Now, I think this is really along the lines of what we're trying to do here. I'm curious about how much we can change in the RFP. Like, even with this, is this a conversation for now, or is it for the SIP, or just kind of like to both, or?
So to give credit where credit's due, Nicole did a lot of work with city attorney outside of this meeting. So all of these recommendations that you're seeing are totally viable to be worked into the RFP.
Okay, because
They don't include preference points, if
along
you
with the
noted,
SIP too. Okay.
but they are viable options to be incorporated into the future RFP.
Okay, and by incorporated, you mean like wording and everything like that? Okay, okay.
I mean, Julian City doesn't need to do exactly the draft word. This is this draft wording, but I think everything that's in here, I think aligns with the SIP and
Got it.
Would be amenable to changes in the RFP.
Exactly.
Okay, good to know. Nice.
Okay. I think right now where our time would be best spent is how we feel about incorporating this. Are we yay on recommendation 1 through 3, or we don't like one of the others? I think that would be something that's good to help Julian's staff so that they know exactly when they're creating the RFP, how we're moving forward. Julie, am I saying this correctly, that this would be a good time to make sure that we're giving you that information?
Yes, exactly. So like what we're aiming for is to collect all of your feedback, and you guys can just have a natural discussion or however it happens. But we're looking for feedback prior to us releasing the next RFP, and so we're here to collect that. So if you guys say, yeah, we love 1, we hate 2, that's great feedback for us. So sorry, the short answer is yes.
Thank you. And just so everyone knows, because priority populations wasn't an actual category, before it was organizational history, program design, outcomes, and impact and budget. So the priority populations being added help with us in our, as we're saying, targeted populations conversations, so we can reach Sacramento's most vulnerable youth easier. So having this addition in there, I think the table, like I said, on recommendation 2, I love the table being brought to the front, so that way we can see exactly. And I believe that this is something that could be good in addition, in adding to the RFP to help with that language. Vice Chair Ghaffari?
I think that.
Oh, sorry. So while everybody's thinking, I want to kind of go back then. I think I'm weighing this into the ground, because now I want to, is it written in our SIP that our preference point has to be the COI tool?
No, the seed COI tool is part of the RFP. So that was a preference point we built in as a way to measure a tool for the RFP and scoring.
Okay.
It's not a requirement of the SIP.
Okay, not a requirement of the SIP. Doesn't have to be a requirement of the actual RFP?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
Is that true? I'm looking at Commissioner Williams about the SIP, about what's actually said in there, because I'm not.
Think it's a requirement? You think it's required?
I thought it said that it's serving.
I can follow up with you guys.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to look at it again then. I'm doubting myself now. So let me look at it, and I'll follow up either in this meeting or.
If I may, can we follow up via an email we can send to the commission as to, I believe, why the seed COI tool was included?
Okay.
Thank you.
Because I feel like I know why, I think we know why it was added. I don't know that it's a requirement in the actual RFP. Because I'm looking at, because I'm thinking, and y'all can, catch me if I'm wrong, because if we're adding recommendation 1, which is going to go, recommendation 1 and 2, going after priority populations, I don't know, and I guess this is my question. If we do need it, fine. Can we add an additional one? if that's the case. Because this is the same preference point where 98% of everyone got it. And for me, extra credit, if I'm comparing it, extra credit normally is something that's a little, I don't want to say harder, but it shows a little bit more impact. And so I would love for us to figure out what a preference point of impact would look like that we could all agree on, where we're all getting to the same place, if that makes sense. So can we add a preference point? I guess is where I'm going.
What I can do ahead of the next meeting, that I believe is October 1st, but what I'll do ahead of the next meeting is put together an email for all of us at the commission that talks about just the use of the SEED COI tool in relation to the examples that Commissioner Kravitsworth provided as part of her presentation.
Okay. With the second addition part to my question, can we add a preference point with impact?
Let me think through that, and then I can include that too as part of the email, and then maybe we could bring it back for discussion in the next meeting, if that works.
Okay. And if that's doing too much, y'all let me know too, because I just want to know.
Just two quick things. I think it really depends on what preference points you want to add. As we know, we can't, there's several things that we've already taken off the table. So it can't go against what's written in the current SIP. Secondly, I have to say every meeting that one of our biggest lessons learned, and I can resend this out to if you guys want to see, we did a survey of all of the applicants of the last RFP. Overwhelmingly, the feedback was this application was way too hard, it was way too long, it was way too complicated. I want to listen to their feedback in the next round. And I'm just concerned that adding multiple preference points and layers and layers and layers is going to do the exact opposite. And I just really want to keep bringing that up because we asked for the feedback, we got it, and I want to honor that and try to simplify the RFP. So I'm not saying that means absolutely no preference points. I'm just saying every layer we add makes that a lot harder to accomplish. And I just want to keep that in mind and forefront for you all.
And I'm going to call on all of the commissioners, and please, by no means am I trying to make the application harder, but I feel like if everything is with intention, because I feel like there's a way of simplifying the actual RFP, whether that be instead of a 500 to 1,000 word count, it's a 250 word count, because that's less words that they would have to say what they need to say. I'm saying clean up, but intentional. I'm not saying make harder. So I want to make sure that that's being very clear, because there are specifics that we're asking for, and there's a specific impact that we want to make. So I feel like with that, you have to be very specific and intentional in wording and what we're asking for. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, and I'm not by any means trying to make this application, this RFP, any harder than what it currently is, okay? We'll say that. And Commissioner Williams.
Thank you. I appreciate this conversation, and I think it's difficult to get at what we want, but maybe there's a way. I don't think we want to throw out the map, but maybe instead of, to your point, it doesn't really make sense as a preference point if everyone's already addressing it. So what I would recommend is integrating that with that section, that 20-point section of having a question to the proposer to say, how are you serving the, I forget, COI, yeah, the map, the folks in the map. So I'm wondering if there's a way we can consolidate it and put it in the narrative, and then that would count as the overall 20 points. So as a dimension. But maybe, I don't know if this makes sense, but providing this background for the CBOs and the proposers to react to, this is how we're thinking about poverty, the population that we want to get at. I don't know if I said that very cleanly, but that was one point. And then I was going to say, I'm wondering too, if we can agree on these recommendations, and then we can kind of fine tune them in terms of preference points and such. And so in that vein, I approve of these recommendations. I'm in support of them. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. I agree. Commissioner Kravitz Works?
Yeah, so totally agree. And I think one question, most of these recs are pretty clear cut if folks are, and provide a pretty clear direction, I think, for city to run with, and we can refine later. The one piece in here that has kind of a little bit more of ambiguity is the piece about whether we want applicants to address or be serving young people that have populations in all three of these categories or two of the three. And so I'll just say that I think after thinking about it more, I'm leaning more towards two of the three as opposed to having them needing to address all three populations in all three. So that's just one piece as people think for a moment. The other piece I'll say, I think, as I said before, I think there might be distinct value to keeping some kind of element, whether it's a preference point or it's incorporated into sort of this new category of priority populations, keeping the SEED/COI tool. And I think we could make it more differentiating by making it a little harder to meet the criteria laid out in the map. And so in the SIP, we say that the commission recommends prioritizing serving these. That's the language in the SIP. So it's not a requirement as far as I read it. So I think, that gives a little bit more flexibility for organizations that are serving underserved areas, but may not be as directly serving individuals who are experiencing the greatest need but this priority populations category is saying, all right, we want you to tell us exactly on a more individual family level that you are serving young people in the greatest needs, not just areas that have been historically underserved. So I see them serving slightly different purposes and both serving to get to our ultimate goal of ensuring that we're meeting the needs of young people and families most impacted by trauma, poverty, violence. But I do think we need to make the SEED tool, COI tool, a little more differentiating. And I think that's a pretty easy thing to do.
Oh. Good deal. All right, Vice Chair Ghaffari.
So just to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, this is focusing more on reaching the individuals and not necessarily the areas?
I think the questions are phrased more in the terms of individual, who you're serving.
Okay, got it. And then, okay, that sounds good, that's it, thank you.
Yeah.
And I like that. I think that's good. If I'm moving forward with what I feel one of the recommendations, I like these, the way that we have them. I think the thing I'm beating with a dead horse right now is still the preference points of, I'm sorry. I would love to see us have a preference point on organizations as a whole, entities, whomever, that are serving in that secondary tertiary. So even though we have the strategic language that's in the actual SIP, even if we took that and said, you're doing these specific ones, I mean, we're not saying anything against them if they aren't, but once again, last meeting, we said 98% of everyone fell into the category. Everybody got the preference point. That's not extra credit to me. If we're looking at who we're trying to reach, and these questions, and in a recommendation too, it shows even in priority populations, and I'm with Commissioner Kravitz words of meeting two of the three. I think in addition, the priority, the language for the preference should be something along those lines. And I don't know what this should look like because I am not the researchers that y'all are. I don't have that language right now, but something along the lines of secondary, tertiary in each of the fund goals, either of the fund goals. But we have that language that's in the strategic investment plan that could go there to say that they're doing that. How they prove it, I don't know. I'm not looking for something that has to be long or any of those things, but I just feel like there should be a preference for people who are actually doing those things.
I think that's going to get tricky with the SIP.
Yeah, so I think where the problem lies, and we don't have a final answer from city attorney, but I'm pretty sure that we cannot give a preference for tertiary. First of all, I think the commission would have to first discuss and then decide what And it seems like nobody's really decided that they want to give a weighted score to tertiary versus primary, but that could happen. But I don't foresee that we'll be able to give a weighted score to any one of those levels of prevention because the council-adopted SIP recommends them all. And so we would be going against the SIP by giving a preference to one over the other. So I don't think that's going to work for preference points. The only other thing I'll say is if we're talking about preference points, what happened with the SEED COI tools, like it can be improved. It's not inherently flawed. It's that taking accountability, we didn't do the best job in writing that section or collecting the data or being able to defend it. So this is where we can, lessons learned, look at that. But this is kind of what happens with any RFP, to be honest. It's really hard to collect that data and analyze it and grade it. And so that, if we applied a preference points to priority populations instead of SEED COI, we might still run into the same issue that the data we're collecting and how we analyze it is more of the issue, and then still 90% are getting it. So that's really an internal city work, and we can take feedback from all of you on what does that look like? What does the evidence look like that you want to see when we look at recommendation 4 and the new question D says evidence of the organization's experience successfully serving these populations. What is that evidence that you guys want to see? What does that look like? Are you asking for data and reporting? Are you asking for, MOUs? What does that look like to you? And then what are we expecting the city, because we have to review that and then give them a grade, or the panel, how are we expecting them to grade that? So that's sort of valuable feedback where it's just, that's the sort of the trap of these preference points that can be applied to SEED, it could be applied to this, it could be applied to that. So I didn't mean to take away from your comment and where you were going, but I just think that could be really valuable feedback for us so that when we do have a preference points that it actually works in theory, not just in theory.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm processing. I have another question, but I'm going to wait. Commissioner Williams?
I just want to say I vote for 2 categories as well, just to keep that conversation going. You made me think about something else, but with priority populations and evidence, I think we could give examples of, for example, where are you recruiting, or where are you getting your youth and children? So if you have a relationship with, say, probation or other types of organizations or CPS, there are ways that we can do that, and maybe we can brainstorm to have some examples, or maybe past evaluations, or, different things like that. I think the other thing, and I don't want to spin this into a whole different conversation. Actually, first I wanted to ask, for the priority, could we have priority points for the area? So for example, we keep saying we want to have more in violence prevention or homelessness. Could we have priority points for programs that address those areas as opposed to the other areas?
I think it depends. I'll take notes and I'll go through and review it against the SIP and other case law, and I can get back to you guys.
Okay, because I think that's one of the things we're trying to correct. And then the other question that I'm kind of mulling over that Commissioner Volsi brought up is, are we going to have current grantees eligible to reapply? And that might be, we might want to punt that question. So I don't know, but I think that's an important question for the RFP.
It is, and to my understanding, current grantees can apply.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yeah, there was no plan to exclude current grantees from applying, but again, welcome to your feedback and discussion.
It's in the SIP,
It is.
I think. It says grantees in the first funding cycle will be eligible to reapply for the second round.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
And so the question is, absolutely, we want to continue the work that's being done, but we're also in this conversation about how we want to correct some of, or realign, not correct, because I think all funding is good, but to realign it. So just, those are my comments.
Absolutely. Good comments. Vice Chair Ghaffari?
Yes, so I realize we're unable to use the primary, secondary language because it's not in the SIP. So I do think this is a conversation for a future meeting. I just think about my experience and the frontline work I've done, working at Wind Youth Services, serving youth experiencing homelessness, and in that tertiary category and at Sacramento Children's Home, going into the homes with youth who are experiencing mental health crises. And so I'm advocating for that voice. I'm not saying I only want those served. So I just want to make that clarification. And then again, this is a future conversation. For now, I think that Commissioner Kravitz-Wertz did a great job on this. And I think that this is great language to help get those youth who are experiencing certain things and for the RFP. So, yeah.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I have a couple of things that I want to say, and I want to make sure that, because I wasn't a part of the actual scoring, so when we're creating a scoring method or a rubric, I come from a financial background, so I'm looking at this like this. If I was looking for someone to deliver, let's say, if I was looking for, let me use financial coaches, right? I'm not just looking for coaches who just educate. I want to see metrics of increased savings or increased credit score or things like that. I'm using that example. So in the scoring, and when we're looking at this, and when we're looking for those organizations and or public entities, is it like they're providing impact reports that are showing did this in, let's say, one of our levels? Are they showing percentages? Like, I guess I'm wondering, am I looking at this wrong? Is it in the scoring when we're trying to be more intentional? Or is there, because when we're saying provide and prove, because MOUs, I don't know if a MOU, for me, I know what an MOU is. I don't know particularly that's, oh, you had an agreement with XYZ company. I don't know if that shows me impact. So I guess I'm just asking on the scoring side of things, just so I can understand, and just in case if anybody else had this question, so I can understand that. Oh, I don't know who would answer that question. Oh, Julie.
Well, you have commissioners.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me go ahead. Commissioner Green.
Okay, I'm doing good. Anyways, again, enjoying it, first day, but I want to take a second and just thank everyone for all the work that you have done, and I like all the work that Commissioner Kravitz-Wertz has put together. As far as the, we're kind of kicking around what's the success rate? What is it based on a score, or is there any like career readiness programs and any of these? Would there be an option for career readiness for the homeless section of that we're working on right now? And then as far as doing those tours, if we could implement any of that on a scoring deal before they were actually granted. I know they've been around for a while, but I know we're going to be touring some of these. I know there's oceans of CBOs out there that are applying for these grants, but seeing firsthand what's going on, I think, is huge, right? Not to act like we're popping the hood, but just to get firsthand experience of that coming from the. So I work for a company called Northern California Construction Training. We're a state-approved pre-apprenticeship program. We work with homeless, formerly incarcerated, folks that are in recovery, people that are just trying to find a career change. And, we cater to every trade that's out there, private and union. And, we try to pave that way, but, mental health is real, addiction's real, and, just trying to figure out what would be another option for the homeless section of that, as well as the mental health and everything else. So, I don't know, you guys have already came so far. I'm kind of like jumping in and kind of waving at everyone as we're rolling down the road, but yes, thank you.
Yes. No, thank you. Commissioner Kravitz-Wertz.
gosh, I'm now thinking, I was like thinking about yours and I'm thinking, what was I going to say originally? I think, I don't know, actually, no, I'm going to withhold my comment until I remember what I was planning to say before that. I will just say, to your point, agreed that there are some examples, just because we're restricted in part by what we wrote in the SIP, but to your point about sort of workforce development and employment opportunities, there are some of those referenced in the SIP already strategies, not so directly in response to the homelessness category, but I think in terms of cross-cutting, they're currently listed in some of the violence intervention and prevention services.
Gina, I can take a stab at going back to your question. So I can just sort of respond to like the standard practice. Like we know we have to do, or sorry, let me back up. So typically when you do ask, there's preference points, which is a little bit different, but if you just have, for example, we have a set of questions that align with our scoring rubric, and we typically will ask grantees to provide some type of evidence. And when they respond, what panelists are often looking for, or what we're wanting to see from the applicant, is some sort of data. And so they don't necessarily have to attach their annual report, but they can pull data and work that into the narrative, because then it becomes more convincing. They have numbers that align with it. So if they say that they run a workforce development program out of District 3, then they could then provide evidence and give us some sort of data point or evaluation metric that they've achieved that then helps to prove that their program is A, successful, and B, that they're doing what they say they do. So that is typically how you would gain sort of the best score in a scoring category and a relative question. So there might be other ways to go about this. There might be better ways. We're open to that. That is pretty standard practice in RFP applicant response. Where an MOU might come into place, and I always say that example because we have used it specifically in SCF because of the SEED COI tool is sort of geographical, and so we were wanting to know, like, you say that these are the neighborhoods you serve, so show us that you are actually working in those neighborhoods. Show us that you have an office location there, or that you're using this community center, or you have an MOU with this school that is located in that area. So that's why that MOU example comes up a lot, because it's related to that geographical SEED COI tool. But there's plenty other examples that might provide sort of quote unquote hard evidence that they're doing the work that they say that they're doing. I don't know if that helps.
No, that does. Thank you for that clarification. Commissioner Kravitz-Wertz?
I remembered. Thank you. The scoring criteria. That's what it was. So in the first recommendation, there's just some examples to start getting to some of that, like what would the sample scoring criteria for this new priority populations category entail. I think they're probably a little too high level still to the points that we've been talking about. But I would like us, or I would encourage us to be a little bit cautious about trying to require applicants, especially smaller and emerging CBOs, to put hard numbers to the work that they're doing, just because in my experience doing research and evaluation with smaller scale CBOs is that they just don't have the resources to collect data on a regular basis to then have someone who has the time to put them all into a spreadsheet and analyze them, and especially with some of the things we're with all of what we're asking for in these RFPs. So I think I'm more interested, at least personally, when I read applications, about if they can really lay out the how of what they're doing, as opposed to necessarily like telling me like we recruited 20 people kind of thing who look like this. I think that's one way of doing it, but I would still be interested in, like, all right, like, how are you doing it? Do I trust that you'll be able to continue doing that sort of thing?
Thank you for that, Julie and Commissioner Kravitz-Wertz, for that, because I think that, since we've started this commission, excuse me, and we've we've been very transparent, we're very passionate, and we want to make sure that whomever are getting the grant funding, that they're not just saying that they're doing something, but that they're actually doing the work. And I think that that's very clear and apparent with us. I asked about the scoring just to see what that looks like, not trying to make this harder for a smaller, emerging, and/or grassroots organization, but evaluation metrics. I guess that's where I was getting at, like, what are those percentages? Is that something that we actually require? The MOU showing working with organizations or schools in certain areas, that all makes sense there. But going back to recommendation 1, seeing what that scoring criteria is, are we saying that evaluation metrics would be too hard? Would that be something that could be a preference point then? If not in the actual, like requirement, like because evaluation metrics I feel are good. 30% of our students attended treatment XYZ plays and/or plays. I'm just looking for what is that, I guess, as we've been having this conversation, what is that thing that differentiates and adds a preference, a good preference for those organizations that actually do have it? And if that is something that we can do. I know I'm beating a dead horse with it, but I'm just very persistent in everything I do. So I want that to be something that we think about as we're moving forward. I want to make sure that we move this conversation forward, because as the time is moving, I want us to go back to, just because we did see a high application rate in mental health, we do have 4 other fund goal areas, just to revisit what we can and what we can't do. For the RFP, we can't uplift, let's say 3 of them, because 2 of them have already been awarded heavily. What are, and this question is to Julie, what did we decide, or what can we do to make sure that we can't do evenly because we didn't base percentages? That'll be a SIP change, understanding that. But what can we do to make sure that we're still addressing the other fund goals and having just as much participation in those areas? And/or do we need to have preference points for those to uplift those? I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out what we need to do to make sure that we're addressing all of our fund goal areas.
Gonna have to think about that one. We're kind of in a tight box with that because of the existing SIP basically said that we were just gonna put the funding out to all 5 fund goals. So we'd have to get pretty creative on how to uplift one over the other.
Okay.
This isn't what you want to hear, but there is, at the end of the day, we do have to bring all final awards to City Council. They have the final approval. So they could decide to do that themselves. However, that power does not currently lie within the commission within this SIP cycle. My biggest recommendation would be take all of that fervor and bring it into editing the next 5-year SIP.
Okay.
Sorry, that's not what you want to hear, but that's my best recommendation.
No. I mean, that's honest, and that's something we're gonna do. I think that we've learned lessons, and we want to make sure that all of the fund goal areas are being addressed. And I think each of us have all probably heard, there isn't enough 0 to 5. There isn't enough. We didn't put enough towards homelessness. We didn't put enough towards substance abuse. Substance abuse is way down there, or violence prevention. And so we do need to look out for ways that we're uplifting all of those, whether that be evenly or we have like a scale of what that looks like. But I would like for us to think about that. As the RFP stands right now, I want to make sure that we have a complete conversation and you have something to take back to staff so that we can move forward with the RFP. So, commissioners, on the actual presentation that Commissioner Kravitz-Wertz put together, are we good with these priority population recommendations? Okay. I'm seeing yeses. I don't see anybody opposing at this particular
Should we
moment.
make a motion to approve? Or-
I think we just have to just say yes, just yes or no. No motion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we can just move forward, because I like this, and I like the language here, so I think that this is good. So far, Commissioner Williams, you good too? Okay. Commissioner Green, how you feel? I know this is first meeting, but you good too? All right, long as we good.
Put me on the hot seat. Yes, I approve.
know.
I was already impressed, but I approve.
Okay, good deal. Okay, so We want to move forward with this. So next steps on this. And so since we're adding this to language of the RFP, we're still figuring out another preference points. What does that look like in next steps on city side?
I don't know, it's just so open-ended, it's hard, I don't really know what to come back with, just with that. So maybe if we could talk more about it. I understand this part,
Yeah.
the priority populations part.
Yeah.
All feedback received on that. But as far as like just a preference point, I'm not sure what the best next step would be, because it's kind of like we have to think about what are you guys wanting to add, and then test it with city attorney and against the SIP and see if it's viable. So it would be, I'm not sure. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what the best next step is. So anybody can jump in and with ideas.
Yeah, preference, can we have a preference point on actual impact? So whether that be an evaluation metric and/or, because we already have the language, we can just elevate that. So if it was, is there a way to add a evaluation metric, percentage-wise or number-wise, or a data number to give preference?
So what does that look like? Are you saying like if an applicant provides like an evaluation report, they would get a preference point? Or I'm just not sure how that would like play out in the actual RFP document or.
Right. I'm trying to, so let's say, if someone's applying for substance abuse and they have an evaluation metric of a percentage of young people in their program who move, I don't know how to verbiage this though, so do y'all understand what I'm saying? It's just I don't know how to verbiage it. Commissioner Kravitz-Wertz?
Well, so this may, you may not have wanted to call me. I guess I'm a little hesitant about this because it forces applicants into sort of potentially narrow definitions of success for young people. So like I do a lot of work in the community violence prevention intervention space, and what we know from those organizations is that young people, like, trajectories aren't linear, right? There's lots of, and I mean, we all know this, there's people like, might be doing well, something happens, they backtrack a little bit, but the success is that they've built enough trust with an organization that someone returns when they're ready, kind of thing. And so like, that's not necessarily, so that might on paper look like, oh, we have a 40% attrition rate or lost a follow-up rate. But like if you waited like another 3 months, they might see like, oh, these are now like we have 90% like second kind of re-enrollments kind of thing. And that is actually potentially an indicator of success because they built enough trust that when someone is ready, they're coming back. So I'm just worried about us defining for organizations what success looks like for young people through hard and fast numbers kind of thing. So I'm just cautious about that a little bit.
I hear you, and I definitely agree, because I guess I'm comparing it to, and y'all would know better than me, like, so let's say a school that has a 98% graduation rate versus a school that has 50. They may receive more funding on the 98%. What is that thing? Because I don't know specifically what that thing is, but I don't know that we as a commission, if we're looking for that, and that could just be a hill that I'm just on at this particular moment. So, Commissioner Green?
So, and, I've already talked about success rate about every time I got up here and talked, but it could just be the numbers of the people that are enrolled as well, right? Instead of, okay, because recovery is very difficult, right? I get it. And like Commissioner Kravitz-Wertz was talking about, some people come back, but I'm more interested in numbers, right? Like, are you helping one person? Are you helping 5? Are you helping 10? If they included, a success rate of them actually getting treatment and getting help and, overcoming these obstacles, I mean, I think maybe that would put them on a higher, or maybe they would score a little higher on that application itself. Or if, if they worked with a lot more numbers and, their success rate, was higher, maybe they got a higher score point. Yeah.
I like that. Maybe, and thank you, Commissioner Green. And maybe this may be something that we need to think about a little bit more, and maybe we can get started on the actual RFP itself, and you don't have to come back on the preference point yet, and we could do a little bit more research, because I would like to do a little bit more research and see what other RFPs or what other children's fund RFPs look like and what they score as preference. So I would say for myself, I know I would like to do a little bit more research on that, so I can actually have something viable to come back to the commission, but would love something in addition to what we currently have. But Julie?
Yeah, sorry, I hope I'm not talking too much. I just want to note that I think these are all really good ideas. I think, like, what we had started doing, which was working well, is imagining what you guys want sort of the outcome of the RFP to be, what do you want differently than what happened last time, and then building out what the preference point might be from there, instead of just looking for a preference point that we might be able to insert. And so if we go back to that conversation of like, what are you trying to get out of this? And then we can try to build in a preference points. And I know we have tight parameters and it's frustrating to come to us and keep asking, and we keep saying no. So Harvina and I can also work offline to really see like, what are our options here? Because they're not super broad. And then maybe we can sort of come together and continue this conversation you know, in the next meeting, or however, if you wanted to do an ad hoc, although I don't know that it's necessarily what you would be looking at. But yeah, I just wanted to say that. And then just to note that one thing that's, it's really sort of, again, I know you all know this, but because it's so broad with the 5 fund goals, it's really sometimes hard to target something that would apply to everyone. So for example, like you're gonna have so many different programs applying. You're gonna have, you know, a mental health program that's offering a 16-week counseling program. And so they might serve 5 people in a quarter, but then you have some other program that's doing like touch point, you know, events, and so they're serving 500. So all of a sudden, that organization is gonna score way higher over the 16-week counseling, and that's not, then that becomes not a fair scoring point.
Yeah.
So there's just like a lot to consider with all of these things, and we try to make it so that everybody's entering on an even sort of field, even though that's pretty much impossible, but we try our best.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to note that.
Julie, thank you for that insight. So can we start with adding this for our priority populations, because there's some really good information.
Yeah, and I do have to say the caveat that we're allowed to take the feedback from the commission, and then it is within the city scope to implement and to write the RFP. And because it's a competitive process, this is a recommendation that we will take into consideration when we write the RFP. Mm-hmm. But I don't want anybody listening out in the public to think that this is going to directly go into the RFP. Absolutely. And then get an idea of, you know, that just gets complicated. So I've got to be clear about that.
Absolutely. And all we can do, and thank you once again, Commissioner Kravitz-Wertz, Commissioner Williams, and Commissioner Ruiz-Mares, who is in here, for all of the work that you've done in your committee, and even working with City Attorney Gill. I would like for us, just so Julie has all of our recommendations so we can get started working on this RFP. If each commissioner, what would you like to see verbally, so that way we have it on video, verbally, what improvement would you like to see in this RFP? If you just had to give it a sentence, what would that look like? So that way they can have that and incorporate that as they're doing the RFP coming up. Is that something we can do? Is it?
For this item, as related to target population, since that's what we're discussing, but I would defer to our clerk's office since this item is related to target populations only. I just worry about potential Brown Act issues if we're talking about the RFP generally. Can
we do it in comments and ideas?
Yes, that would be perfect. Thank you.
All right, well, we're going to go ahead and move on. All right, we're going to move on to the next item then. We're going to talk about member comments, ideas, questions. For commissioners, can I pose a question or no?
I would ask that you don't, Chair. I just want to, I know, I'm sorry.
Okay, all right. I want to say for myself, just so that it's noted, if I'm looking at outcomes for the next RFP to be considered, I would love just for us to reach more of the fund goals. I would like for us to not only have clarification that's being considered when it comes to the priority populations and the scoring itself being updated, if that's something that moves forward. I would like to see more of the fund goals addressed versus everything falling under mental health, so finding that way. So I would just like to say that. Any commissioners with any questions on your own that were not brought on or?
Chair, I just want to confirm, so we did close out item 4 and we
Yes.
moved on to commissioner comments,
Correct.
correct? Okay, perfect. We also have the target populations update, but we can go back to that.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Let's go back to that. I want to,
The presentation was an update, wasn't it?
no, but we had a report out. Did you have a report out?
No, not a report out, but I don't know if there was any public comment on the discussion item.
Did I miss that?
There were no public comments for item
Great.
4. Thank you.
Okay,
And then, yes, that was our report out. Thank you.
okay. All right, so any additional comments? Commissioner Williams?
I have a couple comments. As for the RFP, I think, in general, I would like to see it to be simplified, and maybe what we can do is have more detail and use that extra 20% to have folks demonstrate what they think is impact. And to your point, Commissioner Kravitz-Wertz, sometimes it would be a narrative. It would be maybe how it's impacted an individual. Sometimes it would be numbers. So I think if we make that broad enough that they can determine that, and then we can evaluate. I know that makes it harder when you just, but that's my comment there. I'm going to switch gears a little bit because I really wanted the opportunity to give a shout out to Summer at City Hall. I had the opportunity to see the youth presentations, and you all can see them on July 28th's meeting. And there was a couple things. The Measure L came up a number of times in the presentations. And so for those of you who are not familiar with Summer at City Hall, it's a program here run by YPC, which they did a fantastic job. Students come up with a research project and they present it to City Council. And so the areas were youth employment, also keeping public spaces clean, and there were 2 related to mental health, one on violence and mental health. And one of the comments that and recommendations they had was that when they looked on the Measure L website, they couldn't see the actual programs that were funded. It was more around funding rather than access for youth, and a lot of youth did not know about Measure L. So I'm wondering, as just for a future thing, how we can get that link to the actual programs that are being funded by Measure L. And then a related comment, and it was a subsequent conversation, was how are we really kind of lifting up those dollars that are funded by Measure L in the community, and how are we kind of communicating that to the public? I know there have been in various presses some criticism of Measure L, that it's taking money from the general fund, and I think that this is a fantastic program. I think we're doing really good work. I think there are so many levels of accountability. So going back to an earlier request, I think sooner rather than later, it would be helpful to have the evaluator come and maybe talk about the quarterly reports and what these grantees already have to report. So I don't think this money is going out in the community willy-nilly. It's been very thoughtful. So just, again, just lifting up the good work that's being done by the fund and also by our partners. I would love to see that. So thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams, for sharing that. I'm going to have to go back and look at that. Vice Chair Ghaffari?
I just want to second what Commissioner Williams said about simplification of the RFP. I've had 2 babies in the last 2 years, so a little brain fog, but I do remember the system being very glitchy, at least for the reviewers. So just hoping that that's easier for reviewers, and just the process in general, again, so lots of brain fog. But so just simplification for the reviewers as well, and then just reiterating everything that was discussed today and the things that were agreed on. So.
Good deal. All right, Commissioner Kravitz-Wertz?
Yeah, I think for me, in terms of the RFP, kind of like maybe relatively low-hanging fruit was just making the application time longer, which I think we've already talked about. So I think the first round applicants had a month over the holiday season, and that I think just compounded some of the factors in making it difficult to do. So just having a longer window of application process would be great.
I agree. Great feedback. I'm not sure if I can ask this question, but this is a question of Julie. So because we've put all of this information out for the RFP, is the next process you and staff creating the RFP, and will we be able to, and I don't even know how I'm trying to say this, can we see the RFP? We can't see the RFP?
No, no one can see the RFP. I hold it to myself. No, it stays within the SCF team just because of the whole nature of Measure L and because we want it to be competitive and fair. It stays with us and the city attorney
Got it.
until it's released.
Okay.
Did you have another question? Or was that it?
No, that was it. I think, and that was a silly question that I asked. I'm like, of course we can't see it, because then everybody will see it beforehand. But simplicity, I believe that was one of the things that a lot of organizations mentioned with that actual RFP. This brings me back, going back to what Commissioner Williams says, this brings us back to the community ad hoc, and we stop for a moment and bringing that back just so that we can kind of figure out, what does spotlighting the organizations look like? Can that be, we go over there, we create a post, or we do a video, or what does that look like, so that way that is transparent? And it's interesting that, of course, that the young people will bring that up, because that's true. You can't see who was granted. You can't go back and say, oh, is this a program that I can participate in, or of that sort. So I think that that's something, once we have the evaluator that comes, and we can talk a little bit more about that, and also looking at bringing our community ad hoc back. Our next meeting is what, in October? Okay, all right. So that's something that we can definitely discuss. Okay, I was just trying to make sure that we were good. Okay. October 1st. October 1st is our next meeting, everyone. Okay, looks like we took care of the business at hand. Julie, you need anything else from us before we leave?
No, I was just going to say that we've actually, I don't know if you guys are aware, but the city of Sacramento has their own child care coordinator who specializes in 0 to 5, and she's requested to come and present to you all. So that might be something we'll be bringing in the future, along with the evaluator. And hopefully also, we have some lovely attendees in the audience who are representing our Guaranteed Basic Income program that has begun. Our contract began on July 1st, 2026, and they're launching. They're doing an excellent job. So they also want to come and speak to you guys. So I just wanted to give you a heads up about some future items. And then we'll obviously be doing agenda setting with chair and vice chair to see what you guys want to see coming up. And if this is a wrap on sort of the RFP feedback, again, staff is always open. You guys can email us, call us, request a meeting one-on-one. We can also take feedback, et cetera. So, or whatever else you want to speak about. But I just wanted to sort of highlight that. We have 2 more meetings left in the year. Then we'll also get our calendar for 2027. And we'll be looking at doing another joint meeting with the Sacramento Youth Commission as well next year. So just to give you some heads up about future happenings.
All right. Good deal. So definitely encourage all commissioners, if you didn't get it out today, if there's anything that you would like added, get with Julie and staff regarding that. And so the last item is public comments, matters not on the agenda. Clerk, are there any members of the public who wish to speak?
Yes, Chair, we do have one speaker, Mercedes Parker.
Can y'all hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I probably had a few items that I wanted to say for the last item, but I missed the registration. Firstly, congrats on becoming chair, and thank you for the comments that you uplifted. I think storytelling is really important for Measure O, and I would love to see the city uplift the great work that's happening. On the topic of priority populations and just intersectionality. I don't know where this fits, but I feel like the RFPs, like as far as like preference points, we should be rewarding programs that are serving multiple of those prevention goals at the same time. And I think of RFDC. I'm not employed by RFDC, but I was back in the day, and that was like 5 or 6 years ago. I just recently ran into one of my students that was in an after-school program at Grant High School, which I would have counted as a violence prevention program. She went to college, graduated, now she's in a leadership role at RFDC, and she's continuing that literacy work that they're doing that really serves to address all of those prevention goals. One thing that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention, if it's not a topic of conversation already, is the topic of transportation access for youth. I obviously focus more on foster youth. I work California Youth, we're a foster youth advocacy organization. But it impacts all youth that are impacted by poverty, and it's a cyclical thing. And something that our members are talking about in our chapter. We just had a conversation about it last night. Transportation access is one of the biggest predictors of long-term success, careers, whatever. I'm running out of time, so I'm like running out of steam. But I think that's something that the city should be considering in the next RFP is just programs that can help alleviate. I just got a ticket. I've been driving for 15 years. Mistakes happen, but they impact our young people way more. Suspended licenses impacts employment. People get their cars towed.
Thank you for your comments. Chair, we are done with speakers.
All right. No, thank you so much for your comments. Make sure we're taking that into consideration. Do we have? Okay. All right. All right, with nothing else, I believe that this concludes today's agenda. Thank you so much, commissioners and everyone, members of the public, city staff. Thank you so much for being here today, and this meeting is adjourned. Oh, adjourned.